Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Let me first state that this review of the Neural DSP Quad Cortex is not sponsored in any way, shape or form. I purchased the Quad Cortex with my own money, and in fact I was on the first tier of pre-orders when they first announced it way back in, 2020? And at that time I was using a Kemper floor unit which was serving me quite well. I loved the idea of the smaller form factor of the Quad Cortex, and consequently, sight unseen, laid down a deposit and patiently waited for the release. So I've had the Quad Cortex now for about 2 weeks, and I've used it for a couple of big live shows that we played last weekend. And I thought that it might be beneficial for you to maybe get my thoughts and feelings about the unit, and whether you think it may suit you and your playing needs and requirements. So let's dig straight in, and first of all, the thing that I should mention about the Quad Cortex is the form factor itself is obviously it's very compact. Consequently, the foot switches are possibly a little bit closer together than what a lot of people would probably prefer. For me, it didn't pose a problem when I was performing live last weekend. The actual size itself is perfect, and it's great if you want to just throw it in a backpack, or if you're doing gigs interstate or overseas where you want to throw it in a bag. Obviously when interstate gigs start to fire up again. But the build quality on this is amazing. Okay, first and foremost, they've done an awesome job on the hardware. The hardware is stunning. The placement of the buttons, the way that it the touch screen operates is fantastic. So let me get that out of the way straight away. Love everything about the way that they've actually put the hardware together. I think it's amazing. However, for me, the firmware has a lot of shortcomings. There's a lot that I was quite disappointed about. I was expecting to receive it and be blown away. Unfortunately, that just hasn't been the case for me. It may be for you. Okay, so this is purely my objective comments. For me, there's several things that I'll get a bit more into as we go along that it doesn't do yet. There are some of the things that they have mentioned that would be introduced in further firmware releases. However, at the moment, for me, you can see that I'm using the Eventide H9 because there's things that the Quad Cortex can't do that I have to rely on another pedal. And I wasn't planning on doing that. I was hoping to be able to receive the Quad Cortex, hook it up with my expression pedal, and that would be all I needed to use live. But in this case, at the moment, I'm having to rely on using the H9, and I'll also get into how I'm utilizing that as we move along. For today's video, I'm actually running stereo outs into my DAW, so I'm using Cubase Pro to capture the audio from this. Now, the sounds haven't been specifically set up to record direct. The voicing of them I've set up to use through my direct live setup. So the two shows that I played last weekend, I used the Plexi here, and so obviously the sounds that I've set up were voiced specifically for the Plexi. However, depending on the gig, I might use the Friedman full range monitor, which sounds fantastic. It's got 212 speakers in that, one specifically voiced for guitar, and then there's a full range speaker. And for smaller gigs, I use the Headrush 12-inch, which it's just more compact, it's very light, it's very easy to sort of cart around. So that's kind of the three different setups that I would typically use live. I haven't set any of these sounds up for recording directly into the computer, so the sounds aren't exactly what you would expect, but they're still pretty good. Now, let's have a deeper dive into what I've got set up here. Okay, so I'm currently using the Quad Cortex in scene mode, and one of the biggest issues that many people have mentioned is the switching delay between presets, and it is pretty significant to the point where it's not usable live as a preset switching. It's okay if you wanted to switch to a preset for a song and then flick it into scene mode to actually go through different scenes within a song. That's not typically how I would prefer to use it. I would like to be able to change presets and have a hybrid mode where, for instance, the bottom row of switches may be for selecting presets, but then within each preset, the top row of switches may be able to use as instant access for stomping in certain effects within a preset. That's how I would normally use most foot pedals, and I've previously had many different foot controllers. I've had the last one was the Kemper, as I mentioned. There's the Mua there. Before that, I had the Fractal Audio AX8, which again was a fantastic piece of gear. Prior to that, many of you would know me from a lot of videos that I did for the GT6, GT8 and GT10 floor units, where I did a lot of tutorials, and many on my channel here. So how am I currently using this? I've got basically one preset that I'm using, and I've got it configured to basically change through different amps and sounds that I require. This is incredibly limiting. However, for the moment, I'm sort of getting by with that until hopefully they introduce a hybrid switching mode. So the Quad Cortex does three different modes. You've got scene mode, you've got stomp mode, where you can just set it up to stomp in effects in and out, and then you've got the preset mode, which gives you instant access of 8 presets without banking up and down. If you're using presets, as I mentioned, there is a delay between preset switching, and the delay will be determined by how much processing is being used within each of those presets. So for me, scene mode is giving me the most flexibility. Let me just quickly run through some of the sounds that I've got here. Okay, so my main distorted tone, okay, on the preset F. Now, here's the thing with that. If I want to then go to a lead, like a bit of a boost with some delay or reverb, I have to go to a whole different scene here. Something like the Kemper or previous the Axe, I could second stomp on the currently selected switch. So if I was to hit that same preset again, I would be able to then switch that into a separate scene. At the moment, the Quad Cortex can't achieve that. So I have to have a whole dedicated scene set up for a lead tone. So you can hear. So you can hear I've got a bit of delay, got a bit boost, more gain on the amp. So basically, between my dirty sound, I've got a more dry for rhythm, and then I've got the lead tone. Similarly, I've got a more of a overdriven sound, like a plexi style tone. And again, I have to dedicate a whole nother scene for a lead tone for that tone. Then I move on to my dry clean tone. Nothing too special about that, but because I do like a clean tone with a chorus, I have to have a whole nother scene with a chorus. And then I have a clean tone with an eighth, a dotted eighth delay, which I've got on C and D here. At the moment, I've got a spare scene here, which I'm just using. It's just muted, so if I need to mute the system quickly, I can just go to that one. But that basically covers off the 8 scenes that I'm using within the quad Cortex at the moment. And like I mentioned, I am finding that a little bit limiting. I'm hoping that the switching functionality will be improved significantly, because at the moment it's barely doing the job for what I personally would need. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm using the H9 and at the moment I've got the Mission Control expression pedal plugged into the H9, and the reason for that is because typically I would need to use wah in either a clean or a dirty channel, and not only does the quad Cortex not allow me to turn wah on automatically. At the moment I've got this spring-loaded pedal where typically before I would just get straight on the pedal and I would be able to trigger the wah on and off automatically. This pedal doesn't have a toe switch, so I can't assign that to an expression switch to actually engage an effect. So at the moment, because I've used up pretty much all the scenes, if I wanted wah as well, I would need to dedicate a scene just to have wah on or off. So I'd have to go to that scene and then use wah. I just don't have enough scenes to be able to do that. So this is one of the real limitations that I've found. So what I'm doing at the moment is, let's say for an example, I'm in my lead tone here. I've actually got the H9 set up with a wah tone and then the expression pedal plugged into the H9. Seems a little bit silly to have a pedal just dedicated to do that, but unfortunately it's the only way that I can get around it at the moment without having to utilize separate presets with different scenes. Also, one of the biggest problems I found, there's certain songs where I actually use a flanger effect. The flanger in the quad Cortex is probably the worst flanger I've ever heard in my life. It's so bad that I've actually resorted to using the H9 for flange as well. So typically this is how a flanger should sound. So let's say typically I would run a flanger before the amp block within a preset chain. This top row here I've got is my dirty channel. So if I just tap on a block and go to the modulation, pick flanger. Go into the settings. You can see that the mix is at 100%. The rate is about where I'd like it for a slow sweep. Depth is at full. Now if I turn the feedback all the way up, I can do that with the switch. It just sounds horrible. Yeah, I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do with that. I've used effects for like flanger and that for 20-30 years, and I've never come across a flanger that is less usable than the one in the quad Cortex. So unfortunately that's a big problem for me. I'm hoping that they do fix it, or even introduce additional functionality in terms of the modulations. Speaking of modulations, I'm having a similar issue with the chorus. If I go to my clean preset, let's just jump out of here. If I go to my clean preset, which is running this bottom chain here, so essentially the bottom chain runs from basically this little guitar boost pedal, and then it hits the amp, a little bit of EQ, speaker simulation. I'm using my own cabinet impulse responses that I've purchased as third party. At the moment I'm using Own Hammer and Red Wires. So basically it goes into the speaker, then into a vintage chorus here, which is only on in this bottom scene here. So now again, the chorus is barely usable. It's just not a beautiful lush chorus like you would expect in a high-end multi-effects. Okay, I've heard Behringer pedals, no offense if you're using a Behringer pedal, but I've used Behringer chorus that sound better than the one currently in the Quad Cortex. There's actually two choruses within the Quad Cortex. You've got the tri-chorus and the vintage chorus. Both of them are, you know, again, just usable. I would use them. I could set up a beautiful chorus on the H9, but again, I don't want to have to be relying on using a separate pedal to achieve all my effects. You know, I was kind of hoping that everything came within the one box, but at the moment, until a few things are addressed, it looks like that's how I'm going to be running live. Okay, so that brings me to some of the limitations within the amp modeling and the neural captures. Now, as expected, the neural captures don't have a lot of flexibility in terms of the tone stack and the gain controls. They're kind of captured as the amp, you know, was intended, and you don't have a lot of flexibility, and I'm cool with that. That's fine. However, I'm finding that the amp block is almost as limited, and I'll give you an example of that. So if I go into my dirty tone, which I'm using the Freeman 100 lead. Oops, let's go back. Now you can see the controls here. Now, typically a gain control on an amp will clean up significantly. If you're using a high gain amp, if anyone has used a high gain amp yourself, you will know that you can clean it up considerably with the gain control, or a balance between using the master and the gain. You can actually get quite a clean tone with most high gain amps just by basically tweaking the gain. Unfortunately, the gain control just doesn't seem to react like an actual amp. I'll give you an example of that by turning the gain up and down. You'll see that it has very limited control. Okay, so see, it sounds like it's turning it down, but it's not actually attenuating the gain, and that's, for me, a big problem. You know, you should be able to select an amp module and be able to, you know, have a fair amount of control over how much gain is being produced by the gain control. At the moment, I'm having to select an amp that has the gain already kind of how I want it, and you know, I just don't find that I'm having the flexibility to be able to really tweak a sound the way that I want, because the gain structure of the amp block just doesn't give me that flexibility. So there's almost, you know, there's barely any discernible difference between, say, a setting of 2 to a setting of 6. It's really only when it dips below 1.5 that it seems to do anything, and it sort of attenuates the volume more than the actual gain or the saturation of the gain. So that's kind of just turned the volume down, hasn't really affected the gain that much. So for me, there is certain limitations within the amp blocks. Don't get me wrong here. Some of the amps sound, incredible. Live last weekend, I was running into the Plexi, and I had a lot of comments from the sound crew and different people that were kind of a bit blown away by. They thought the sound was coming out of the Plexi, but I'm really only running the Quad Cortex into the effects return, so I'm using the Plexi more like a power amp than anything. All the tone was coming from the Quad Cortex, and it sounded stellar. Like there was, the how huge. A couple of other things that I'm finding are a little bit limited with the amp block is some of the other settings. Again, they don't really seem to make a big difference to the overall tone. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. I would think after having floor modeling for so many years that I kind of know what I'm doing. But in this case, things like that voice button seems to make absolutely no difference whatsoever. Again, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Saturation definitely makes a difference, but not in a good way. And controls such as the tone stack, again, very minimal amount of control there. I would typically have to tailor the tone with an EQ after the amp block, which I have actually done here. You can see that I'm running an EQ to give me more flexibility over the actual tone of the amp. And I just would have expected that the amp blocks had more control within them. Any other unit that I've used, such as the Axe Effects, which is known for modeling, it has an abundance of control, and the controls that you tweak, you can hear the difference as you do make those changes. So that's my gripe with the amp block. I just think that all in all, they've produced this wonderful hardware unit, but the firmware is still very much lacking. And that's not to say that I haven't produced some incredible sounds so far. I just find that to give you an example with my clean tone here. With the Kemper and also the Axe Effects, I would have a block that I would use for a shimmer tone. At the moment, I'm producing a shimmer tone from the H9. And the Quad Cortex can do a shimmer tone, but it's you have to set up a few blocks to achieve it, and unfortunately the processing that I'm currently using within this one preset and the way that the chain is, I just can't really effectively configure it to give me the type of shimmer tone that I want to use within this one preset. I would have to have a whole separate preset dedicated to shimmer. In fact, I have done that. But sometimes within a song, there might be, say, a bridge where I wanted to basically use a shimmer to create like a pad effect within, like a sustained chord. So I typically just basically punch that in and out for that section. Unfortunately, at the moment, having a separate preset dedicated to shimmer, I can't do that. I can't quickly change to that other preset and back to actually get the shimmer tone for it. So that's another limitation. I'm also using the H9 for just basically an auto wah, a funky wah. Again, the Cortex can do it, but within that one preset, I'm limited with some chaining between. If I wanted to have that auto wah for every single tone, each amp that I've got running, I just can't achieve it. So there are a few things that I'm hoping will be addressed and fixed with future firmware updates. Neural DSP, if you're watching this video, I hope you take some of these ideas on board. I'm sure I'm probably not the only one that feels this way. The firmware just lacks a little bit of finesse, and there's a few of the effects that really do need some work. So I'm hoping that they will be addressed in firmware updates in future. The last thing that I'm finding a little bit, maybe I haven't found a way of doing it, but currently, and I came across this the other day when I was reconfiguring some scenes. Now, at the moment I've got my plexi kind of tone on the scene G, and I had a clean tone directly above it, but I found that I really needed to be able to access my lead tone on scene C, which is directly above. Just makes it easier when I'm playing live to be able to go up and down rather than navigating sideways to try and find that preset. So previously I had a clean tone, in fact I had the clean tone with the chorus on that scene. So to be able to change that, I wanted to copy all the scene functionality from the clean chorus across to where I've got it now on E, but I had to do it manually. I had to go basically onto the scene E, and then I had to configure everything manually. Now there might be a way of being able to copy scenes between each other. I haven't found a way of doing it. If you do know of a way, please comment below and let me know what I'm missing, because at the moment it took me half an hour to then go and reconfigure the clean tone to another scene so that then I could configure a lead tone for my plexi sound on that scene C. So that's just a bit of a little bit of an irk there. I think that could be done much more seamlessly by being able to copy a scene and then paste it onto another scene. Again, it may have that functionality, I've just probably missed it. So there you go, that's the things that I'm finding that I'm having trouble with. The hardware itself is absolutely stellar. I can't fault the way that they've actually put this thing together. The UI, the screen, everything is just amazing. I just think there's a lot of things within the firmware that need to be addressed, and then this thing will be a real showstopper. I think that in terms of quad Cortex, the competition such as the Axe FX, the Kemper, the Helix, this thing has a real potential to be a real sort of game changer in terms of what it can provide. It just needs to have a little bit of work done on it. So let me just summarize by saying I'm not looking at getting rid of this unit anytime soon. I'm confident that Neural DSP will address most, hopefully all of these problems at some point. At the moment I'm getting by with what I've got. I think some of the tones that I've got are incredible. Playing live last weekend, playing on a big stage in front of 5,000 people, running into the plexi, sounded just incredible. Okay, I couldn't be happier, but at the moment there is a fair amount of tap dancing involved and having to use pedals. At the moment, because I'm running the expression pedal into the H9, I can't run it simultaneously into the actual quad Cortex. So I would like to be able to utilize certain assignments within the quad Cortex using the expression pedal. I do have other expression pedals, but this one's my favorite. And again, I don't want to be carting extra pedals and patching all these different pedals in. I just want to be able to use the quad Cortex with the expression pedal and have it do everything I want it to do. But at the moment it doesn't do that. So Neural DSP, if you're listening, watching, I hope you take some of these points on board. Please don't see them as criticisms. They're things that I think need to be addressed for this pedal to truly be a game changer in the industry. You know, the main competitors like the XFX and the Kemper and the Helix, you know, they do a lot of these things much better. So if you want to be in that same ballpark, then you really do need to look at addressing some of those concerns. Other than that, love it. I hope that this video has been informative for you and help you make a decision as to whether you think it's right for you. You might want to hold off a little bit, see where the firmware develops, and from there, you know, make your decision later on. But again, thanks for watching, take care, and bye for now.